Hello, everybody, and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast number CDXXXIII, recorded live Wednesday, May 29th, 2019. And for those of you who are not Roman or don't speak Latin fluently, it's number 433.
Oh, it's very nice of you to translate that for everyone.
That's another one of the services I provide, yes. So it's been a while since you and I've been together. It's very excited.
I know. I think 3 weeks. I don't even know.
I would have guessed longer than that. Yeah. So but for folks that are listening to this late or are listening to this at all, I haven't produced the last one or two yet, so they don't know that we're not going to be together. So it's all going to be the story will unfold nicely.
Yeah. Gotcha. They'll be riveted by the tales of woe. And...
on the edge of their seat. Well, it is, we're coming up on the end of the TV season, so we have to have a big cliffhanger ending. Will Todd and Shane get back together? What'll happen to the podcast? Tune in next season.
I know the kids are on summer break, so we can look forward to Chewy making rompous noises, the kids making rompous noises. We got a lot of fun stuff set up for the summer here.
Yeah, I got the vacuuming going on upstairs. I'm already trying to get my kids sent away to any number of camps. I was talking to my mom the other day, and she's like, well, if this kid's at summer camp, maybe these kids can come to our house. I'm like, oh, there's no maybe to it. Yeah. Yes and yes.
Daddy needs a little free time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and speaking of free time, though, right? I mean, that's kind of been the problem is, between SharePoint Conference and we both have real jobs lately. It's been a lot of... getting this thing to line up, it's been a little rough. So
yeah, and last Wednesday I was at the SharePoint Conference. I was doing another broadcast. I was doing a Twitch thing with those people around this time, and you had flown home, and it was a mess. But we're back. Hopefully we'll be able to get something, maybe two of these in a row together. I don't know.
Yeah, how's next week looking? Who knows?
Nah, probably not good. Probably not good. But one of the great things was at the SharePoint Conference is I got to hang out with the folks from SysKit. They were complimenting me on how great my SysKit image looked above my chair here, and nothing but compliments. So I just want the haters to know that they loved it.
The piece of paper. I'd like to point out we need to tape the corner again. We're getting some new shadows. Folks, this is how I know what time it is in Todd's office. Just look for the shadow that comes off of his fancy piece of paper SysKit sign.
It's like a sundial. It's just. Yeah, they did mention maybe getting me an even better one. I don't know. That seemed like crazy talk off to see what I don't know what it's neon signs or something. I don't know how they're going to top that thing, but it's.
And when they get you a better one, my advice to them, if they're listening, which I'm sure they are, is they probably should get you one that is not square, because clearly your wall is not square, because that sign is like at a 47-degree angle right now. So if they got a round or something like that, we wouldn't know how unsquare the walls are there in Ames, Iowa.
That's true. Well, gravity's a little different. Being the center of the universe and all gravity.
I can see that. And the sundial position. I understand. Maybe it's an optical illusion. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
You got it. But I did get to, I hung out at their booth. Some Praxis didn't have a booth, and there's no SharePoint 911 booth to be the center of the conference. So I hung out there. It was a good time. Met a lot of people. So I've been at a couple events. I don't know if you and I have even talked since I was at SharePoint Saturday Atlanta. But you and I always talk about on the podcast how, somebody sees us at a conference, come up and introduce themselves and talk to them. I probably had half a dozen people do that to me in Atlanta. And so I'm talking 5 or 6 people I've never met before that came up and all very sheepishly, hey. So that was awesome. And then same at the SharePoint conference. So some of it at the booth, the SysKit booth, and then some of it just in the halls and all that. So thanks to everybody. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was very nice of all of them. And I assume that they all got the $5 that your mom offered as a bounty for making you feel important. So
well, there was some of that, but we all just really sat around and talked about how we don't like you. That was really the topic. The thing that brought us all together was our dislike for Shane. And I found that while dislike for you is universal, the things about you that we dislike are all just a little different, little individual snowflakes that make up that. So yeah,
I can see that. He's too good looking as some people's worst fear. He's too smart as other people's. He's too humble as the other one, right? I can see where people kind of struggle with which thing they hate about me the most.
Too charming. Yeah, it's just so much to choose from. Yeah.
I've been working on dashing, but I'm just, dashing's a little. I'm not as young, so being dashing's a little tougher.
Yes, more ambling or stumbling, less dashing. Yeah. No, it was good. So a bunch of people did that, and we always say it's tough because you don't know people, and it's tough to introduce yourself to somebody you don't know. But again, I probably had a half a dozen at each event come up and say hi. So I appreciate that, and I really do mean it. You can come up and say hi whenever. It was a pretty good time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a SharePoint conference overall was a pretty good time, right? There was a lot of people there, lots of energy again, and
place was packed. So like for the keynote, so you and I always mock keynotes and don't go to keynotes, but I try to go to keynotes because there's usually excitement. And there was a line outside the room for the keynote. And so I stood in line for however long, and then Mark and I and Julie and Derek, we were all there. We couldn't even get seats together, even though we were right outside the door when the doors opened because it just filled in. It was packed. It was a great time.
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite things still about all of it is the range, right? I mean, there's the people that have been going to it for, I don't know, 12 years or however long now at this point. I think 12 is probably about the right guess.
Yeah.
But then there was plenty of new people, right? They're like, hey, I just got my first job doing SharePoint. Can you help me? And you're like, oh my God. But it may make complete sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's the curse of knowledge, which we talk about so much. It's like, how does this person not know, not to rename their content databases so they don't have goods at the end? Or how do they not know, that they should patch this thing? Or you're just like, wow. So
for those of you that weren't at SharePoint Conference, Shane and I did a pre-day conference on Monday, all day long about SharePoint administration. And we didn't really have a focus. And afterwards, as I was telling people, Shane and I did, they're like, oh, what was it? And I'm like, it wasn't really like administration because Brian Alderman was doing an Office 365 administration session right next door. It was really like 7 hours of stuff Shane and Todd want to talk about. It was like our greatest hits, really. But so part of it was on-prem and part of it was online, and some of it was philosophical. It was all very meandering. But when we started to kind of get the feel for the room, we asked how many of those people still had on-prem servers, and it was a solid third to a half of the room that still had on-prem servers. I was kind of surprised by that.
And probably a half of those people said they were right. They're still in that I'm never moving to the cloud stance. They're like, no cloud, right? I mean, half. So 15% of our audience was hell-bent that they were never moving to Office 365.
It was a good, wide breadth of people in that class. So, and I hopefully, so once we kind of got the feel for the room, like who's on-prem, half the room raise their hand, and who's online, half the room raise, and how many of you on-prem will never go online? A bunch of people are like, well, I've got good news for you. Everybody's going to leave here disappointed because we're going to talk about a bunch of online things that are going to make that group mad. Going to talk about a bunch on-prem. They'll make that group mad. But hopefully everybody got something out of it. And I got some people came up afterwards and sounded very good.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, right? Some people wanted more technical. Some people wanted less technical. Some people wanted, that's a really tough session we signed ourselves up for, just because it's so broad. But what we tried to convey to the audience is, to be good at either side, you've got to understand what the other side, the other half has to know what you're missing or what you're working, towards, and that's really important. I think that's underappreciated by a lot of people. Like, oh, I'm just all in Office 365 online. I don't need to know anything about on-prem. But you do. You need to have that knowledge foundation. So if something comes up that doesn't work in the cloud, does on-prem have a fit? Is there an option there, or do you have to go to something completely random? So. It's a little tough.
Yeah, it is, and I think there are times when your nice historical knowledge of SharePoint gets in the way because we've always done it this way. Why would we? But oftentimes it gives us a good foundation for figuring out what works and what doesn't, and what bolts in where. And so I think being exposed to that, whether you need it or not, is a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, and then you guys, as you can probably, as listeners of the show, can all appreciate, Todd talks too much. And we had so much content to get through there, right? Because we had oodles and oodles and oodles. So I got bored at one point. I bust out my laptop while he's talking, right? Whatever. And so I made like little signs on my computer, like must go faster, and little smiley faces and things. And so like the whole show, I'm like trying to edge him on, like, you're talking too much, without just waiting and being like, Todd, shut the hell up. So it was a lot of fun.
Which is odd, because I'm pretty sure you've said that exact phrase, Todd, shut the hell up, on mic in front of a crowd at least once. But yes, we were running the slides off of my machine, and every time I would look, over at Shane or look around, there would be some disparaging message showing up on his machine. Yes, all day long. He was keeping busy over there.
Yeah, so just know that even when we're on stage presenting, we're still talking to each other because, we do other mean things. We're up there. We probably can't disclose all of those on the show, but
no.
we there's still stuff happening up there that,
It's... Yeah, but it was a good time. So thanks to everybody that came out for that. We had a big crowd, good crowd. Asked a lot of great questions, a lot of really engaged people. So it was really good. And I think if you listen to it, I think I've sent the slides out to everybody. I've sent the slides to the SharePoint conference people. So however they're exposing them, it should all be there. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to us.
Definitely. So then I guess, do we want to jump into like some of the announcements and stuff? Or
Yeah. There was a ton of things announced, but what are a couple of things that you're excited about?
Well, I mean, let's start with some of the ones I thought were kind of meh first. How about that? So let's jump way down the bottom. So there was some SharePoint on-prem announcements, which was interesting because all the SharePoint on-prem announcements, all the major announcements, were about running SharePoint on-prem inside of Azure or Azure Stack using SQL paths in Azure. It was a very on-prem is the new cloud type of thing going on, or the cloud is the new on-prem. I don't know. It was a weird dynamic that, so looking like the comments that they got back from those, it was very, people were like, what the heck is this, right? There's nothing here for me. Where's all the features they were looking for? Whereas all the on-prem was really just about how you could do it in a more cloudy way. So.
Yeah, and I don't think there's many surprises there. They really want everybody moving to the cloud. I get it.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I understand some people feel like they can't go for this reason or that reason, but I think at some point you have to appreciate that if you're the one person who can't go, right? You're in the minority.
Yeah. And
Microsoft can't cater to the 2% of the world that will never go to the cloud. At some point, they just got to be like, we've done what we can do for you guys. So.
Yeah, so I did notice that. That'll be interesting to see how many people jump on that, the Azure Stack support and the SQL Path support and all that.
Yeah, Azure, I couldn't imagine trying to do like Azure Stack at scale, which is basically just building an Azure inside your own data center. It just seems wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, it does. It does. So another one you weren't impressed with was the SharePoint home site.
Yeah, I think for me, and I haven't tried out home sites or touched them in any way, but kind of reading and understanding them, basically they took communication sites and they put another layer of lipstick on top of it, and now they're calling them SharePoint home sites. They got a little more functionality, a little more flexibility, but what they're really driving at is they want that to become your jumping off point, right? The center of your SharePoint universe.
Yeah.
But I guess I would struggle, today, not everyone, but a lot of people have already got a center of their SharePoint universe. So is the idea that you go and stand up this new SharePoint center of the universe, and then at some point you flip a switch and do the SharePoint site collection renaming stuff you were talking to me about earlier and have to move? I mean, there's not let me take this team site that I'm using for everything today, press a button and make it a home site. I don't know. The home site thing just seemed like a lot of pretty and exciting, but not anything I would actually go and add to my environment. I don't know.
Yeah. So a lot of that's true. I guess one thing I will say is on-prem, online, whatever, the content and the platform is always changing. So the idea that you've got a homepage now, that doesn't mean squat, because no matter what happens, you're going to constantly be changing that. New technologies are going to be coming out. I think and I don't know what the full story is yet, but for early adopters for Office 365, they're exactly in the spot where you talked about. They had to create a team site at the root of their tenant. There was no other option. And so they started building there with the tools that they could, crude bricks, and I mean just none of the, they just and got something there and got used to it. And now you can put communication sites there, but you can't, like you said, you can't convert them. And then a home site is built on top of a communication site. So I don't know what that switching story, what the official line on that switching story is going to be. But yeah, I think this is, going forward, there's going to be new customers on Office 365. And I think this home site is a perfect choice for people who are coming into Office 365, coming into SharePoint Online and need something to lay down at that root. this is the thing. That's what they should do. And I think that's just going to get better. And I'm sure there's going to be some story for how to swap things out, and I don't know what it's going to be, but it'll be there.
Well, and I wonder though, so if I walked up to you today and said, hey, I just started a new business around Chewy's Toys. We got 150 people. We're going to just hire them all on day one. I want to start an Office 365. What do I do? Right? There's an argument to be made, I think, in this day and age that you should start with Teams. Teams should be the center of your universe. So you don't need this SharePoint jumping off spot. So right, I just feel like there's a lot of mixed confusion, which is part of constant change, which I'm not complaining about, but I can see where you could get overwhelmed. Well, so do I go with a communication site, a home site? Do I just start with Teams? Do I, where do I, what is really the center of my universe? Do I build both and let my users just kind of go where they want for the center? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think Teams and home sites are not mutually exclusive. So I think the root of your tenant will be a home site. And then your individual projects or groups or whatever maybe will be Teams, maybe will be SharePoint. Again, it just depends on how your business works and what your preferred communication method is. But I think for almost any business now that I'm talking to, if they say they're coming into Office 365, a home site's going to be what's going to be at the root, I think. Yeah. After that, it depends. But I think for the root, a home site.
Yeah, because we also have, the people who are starting their day at office.com, which we talked about at some point. I remember recently.
I talk about it all the time, yeah.
Yeah, right? The whole idea that seems ridiculous until you start to do it, and you're like, this isn't a bad spot to start my day.
Yep. And I've talked to a bunch of people, customers, both that have migrated from SharePoint on-prem and file shares and new, and that idea of, just end user crawling, walking, running, that has become such an important part. Like you and I never really, we did SharePoint training, but we did admin training. But I find myself doing a lot of user training now because there are so many of these techniques that are not necessarily intuitive that are so helpful. And so I'm talking to a customer this afternoon. I'm doing all back end things for them, but we're going to talk about the end user training I'm going to be doing for them because that's going to help their migration and help their users be less frustrated. When I say things like that, like go to office.com, it sounds dumb, it sounds cheesy, and then click the SharePoint link if what you're looking for is in share. That whole thing that we went through at the session, that has just become, no matter what I'm doing with a customer, that has just become part of it. That is just what I do. Yeah.
Well, no, and there's so much of that, right? I mean, for example, so for all of our file storage as a company is in some form of SharePoint, right? OneDrive or SharePoint. But I never, ever go to SharePoint. I use the sync client and just work with the folders right on my PC. And it doesn't even matter where they live out there now. And that's just such a departure. But that's not immediately obvious until, to your point, you go and show the users and like, hey, use this sync client. And now it's just right here in Explorer like you expect. And the Office clients are so smart now. As long as you logged into them, they just know what documents you're working on, even over on your other PC. And I definitely see the upside. I'm glad you're getting to teach people and point them in the right direction to empower them.
Yep, and I've got one customer that they work exclusively out of Teams, which is frustrating and maddening for me because I just don't think in Teams.
Yeah.
And so that's been valuable to me because it's made me, get out of that. But this morning I had a meeting with them and they were talking about some spreadsheet that had some data that I had to work with, and we're doing a screen share and she's looking at it in Teams and I'm trying to figure out where it's at in SharePoint because that's just how my head works. And so training users on that, yes, it's in Teams, but if you click files, you can click open in SharePoint, and if that's where you're comfortable, great. If it's a sync client, great. Yeah,
we've got 2 or 3 customers that are the same way. They only work in Teams. They won't do phone calls. They won't do emails. It is, if you want to talk, work, interact with this customer, it is in a Teams channel. And that, to your point, those are new muscles for us. I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah, it's not comfortable, but it's good. Again, the end user piece is a bigger part of what I do. So being forced to do things I wouldn't normally do, as much as it's painful, it's probably a good thing for me.
Yeah. Which one of these you want to jump to?
Well, so I think OneDrive had a lot of great announcements. OneDrive has been one of those technologies that has ebbed and flowed. I've liked OneDrive since back before it was called OneDrive. And there was some dark years for it. And then, 3 or 4 years ago, they kind of got a little more, spring in their step and fixed a bunch, and then they kind of sat on those wins for a while and fell a little behind. Now they're starting to catch back up again, and there was a lot of great announcements. I think the big one that made for a really terrible demo, but was important, was the whole Delta Sync for non-Office files, which is a big mouthful. But for, man, I think legitimately like 10 years now, when the new Office document formats, the DocX and SLXX, which I can never say, came out, that gave the Office client and all the sync clients and all that the ability to sync just changes to a Word document because of the way things were packaged up. But if it wasn't a document that Microsoft knew about, then you couldn't do that. And the OneDrive client has not figured out how to do that. So the demo was really bad, but it was a big image. It was like a gigabyte image, and they threw some text on it, just opened up a text box, and showed that it didn't sync the entire 1 gig bitmap or whatever it was back up to the cloud. Not a great demo, but the functionality is great. And I've got another customer legitimately that's getting nailed network-wise by sync traffic, because they did the syncing that you and I talked about, having it all on your desktop, because they came from file share, so that's where their head's at, and they're slowly moving out of that. Everybody's syncing everything up one side and down the other, and it's killing their network. And so hopefully some of these changes to sync will help alleviate that pressure.
No, that's very cool. Yeah, and I think it was in the 2010 was when all the crazy file shredding and all that, right?
Cobalt and all that. Yep.
Yeah, and they tried to explain it and demo it to us back then, and they just failed terribly, and it turned out that shredding the file made it bigger for a while, and there was some weird times, but yeah, they've gotten a lot better at that. So I'm with you. Every time they enhance the sync client, that's just a win for the whole internet as a whole, right? There's more room for cat videos and Netflix when they cut down on the syncing.
Yep, Kyle says that his dream is for File Explorer to show metadata columns. Yeah, that's a pretty common request. I don't know how they're going to do that, if they're going to do that, but that comes up all the time.
Yeah, no, and I did in the announcement, right, and we linked to that in the show notes, but I did see a really interesting phrase, right? And I know that when they write those things that they go through them and they word things, and it's all written very much like a lawyer wrote it.
Very, very deliberately. Every word is chosen deliberately.
Which is unlike any words that come out of my mouth. But so, they said OneDrive is the Files app for Microsoft 365. And that just grabbed me as that's really blatant that, man, we want all your crap in OneDrive, right? That's what it says.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've felt that way. I like my stuff in OneDrive, so it doesn't upset me, but it was really just a blatant, by golly, people, you're going to put your crap in OneDrive whether you like it or not one day. That's the way I read it. So, I don't know. Yeah,
when I think they mean OneDrive the sync app, not OneDrive the location, but I'd have to read where that quote came out of.
It was a headline. It's all it said was literally those 7 words.
Yeah, so I think that I think that that this is the app you'll use to interact with files, I think, but I would have to read that. And the new hover cards that they've got now are pretty fancy, that have lots of good information on them.
Yeah, the average reading time for like a Word document. So they call it inside look. Words at a glance. I thought that was kind of cool. I guess I always ignore when I see average reading time on articles and things like that, but apparently the world likes that if they're rolling that into OneDrive capabilities. So.
Yeah, so the OneDrive team, they're hitting it now. I'm excited about OneDrive again.
I thought they won the announcements. From reading all the announcements I could find, I thought the OneDrive team had the best announcements and the most.
I can tell you, sitting in the room, the announcement that I noticed getting the most amount of applause was when Caruana, I think, demonstrated renaming a site collection. That single thing probably got the most cheers from the audience. That still has not shown up in any of my tenants. Like, I have seen it a bunch of places. I've seen a bunch of blog posts on it. I saw it in real life. I don't think any of my tenants can do it yet.
Yeah, well, they didn't make any of the announcement, like, recap articles that they wrote.
Interesting.
For whatever that's worth, right? Because I didn't get to go to the keynote like you did. So I was basically, the keynote for me was whatever they decided to publish in the blog post. And I have not seen that one. I mean, I knew about it, but I hadn't seen it. So interesting that was what you thought was the key moment, and they didn't even mention it in any of their stuff.
The frustrating thing is I want to play with this because I want to blog it and talk about it, There's also a PowerShell commandlet that will rename site collections, and if I try to do that in any of my tenants, I just get an error back that says it's not supported. So I mean, it's something on the back end that I can't change. In the chat room, Kyle's asking how the redirects work, and it sounds like they've got that all figured out. So if you have, tenant.sharepoint.com/site/site1, and you rename that to site 2, it's smart enough in the background that any requests for site 1 will get automatically forwarded to site 2 automatically. And then Eric's like, yeah, I get that. Or no, I guess Kyle was like, and then what happens when you create another site collection with that same URL? That one, I'm curious how that pans out.
I think that's a solid question by Kyle.
Oh, and Eric's saying that there was a Q&A session at the end, and as an admin, you're able to expire the old one when you want to. So there you go. That's the answer to that. Clearly, they've thought of it. Clearly, they had something in place.
Yeah, good for them. Yeah. Other things the OneDrive team did, so now like when you embed something in Microsoft Teams, like if you in context, you're writing a message, you add a file, you can you attach the file and then you can get the share menu, and so you can actually control the sharing with that file right there. So I think one of the big themes I was seeing was a lot of the contextual stuff you get from like right-clicking files and things like that in OneDrive. They're trying to, everywhere that they're exposing OneDrive files, they're trying to expose all of the OneDrive functionality at the same time. They've got some misses still, I think, but that's it looks like one of their solid goals is to try and make it so interacting with a OneDrive file is the same no matter where you're interacting with it from.
Yeah, and I remember a couple of the demos they did that were cool. One of them is they were demonstrating that new Fluid framework, which is the ability, kind of like what you're talking about, embed a file in Teams or something else, and it gets updated dynamically. So you could embed a spreadsheet in Teams, and then if you're in Excel editing the spreadsheet, the view of that spreadsheet in Teams updates dynamically, which is pretty cool. And they were showing the Word web app, and they had like a Brady Bunch style 3x3 grid, and somebody's typing in it, and all the other ones are updating automatically as the person's typing, and it was happening super fast. They were talking about how on the back end that's Azure File Storage that's making that. I don't know how that works. But then to really show off, like at this point, again, they're just showing off. They showed that same functionality off, but turned auto-translating on. So they had English, somebody was typing in English, and they had 8 other languages, and as they're typing a phrase in English, it was updating automatically and being translated on the fly in the other windows, which is science fiction. I can't even believe that really exists.
Yeah, when I would wonder, I mean, I'm certain they chose the phrases and words they were translating very, very meticulously, right? Once again.
Oh, right, yeah.
One thing that kind of jumps to my mind right away there, right? So over the last few weeks, while we've been doing our real jobs, I was working on a Power Apps app that was in both English and in Dutch.
Okay.
My Dutch is not very good.
Really? Your English is not very good either, so at least that's consistent.
I have a great story about that. I probably won't tell.
For the After Dark show?
Yeah. But when we kind of got it all translated, and then we were fighting with a little of this and a little of that, because it turns out like a lot of times I'll filter based on like status equals rejected. Well, now I have to filter on status equals rejected or whatever, that word is in Dutch. And so like, all right, well, a word like rejected should be pretty easy to like sort. And, because I couldn't get a hold of Marika at that point. So I jump over in the Bing translator and, and it gives me like 17 ways to say rejected. I'm like, oh.
So why wouldn't you make that a Boolean?
Because there was more than one. There's rejected, there's approved, there's pending, there's assigned.
Well, that's a dumb reason. I don't
really think these things out, Todd. I just make up stuff as I go.
Jeez, holy cow. Yeah, that's complicated.
Yeah. I also, so speaking of that same thing, random tangent, so they use Project Web Access or Web PWA, whatever the right acronym for tracking all their projects. And so they've got a UK site, and so it's in English, and that's English and PWA in English. And they've got a Dutch site, and so that's PWA in Dutch. And so in my head, right, it's the API should be one of two things, just in English everywhere, or it should be like a one-for-one kind of matching translation, right? I should be able to find that project name over here is project NAAM over here, because that's how you translate project name. And it wasn't. The APIs are like, the Dutch API is like a hybrid of English, direct one-to-one translations like that,
Right.
and just new made-up properties for the same damn object. But I'm like, how did you restructure that in this API? Trying to match up my queries across those two APIs was about to make me throw myself off a bridge, because I just, between the language
into a canal, into a Dutch canal. Yeah.
well, of course. But the fact that, there just wasn't a one-for-one like structure, I was like, how in the world did you people do this? Back to, my kids probably could have come up with a worse way to have implemented this API in Dutch.
Yeah. Very, very, very frustrating. We're getting better though. It's the multilingual stuff's. I'm constantly amazed by it. And again, there's a lot of machine translation going on in the background that comes up with some funny translations. But humans have been doing funny translations for a long time too. So that's not new.
No? Well,
Machines are just doing them faster.
And to your, and to the other point, right? Is how many different versions of English are there really, right? We got Southern English, we got Northern English, we got Midwestern English, we got proper English, we got hillbilly English, we got, surfer dude English, right? If you really think about translating even to English, right, there's 17 different ways to translate things depending on the regions in the country even. So,
yeah, it's a Herculean task for sure.
Yes.
So the one that you like the best, though, tell the audience what really knocked your socks off.
Well, I don't know if you guys know this, but in SharePoint, my favorite feature was always search, right? I wrote a book, bestseller. It sold like 7 copies of a Microsoft search.
You rounded up on that?
I did. Thank you for that. And then you had the returns. It was actually negative somehow.
So you paid them to write that book. I don't know how that happened, but
it was terrible. Anyway, so as part of the announcement kind of came out of Build, but it was reiterated here again recently. Microsoft Search, right? And this is this holy grail of, finally starting to bring all of our search together, right? So if you think about SharePoint Search, we've always been really happy the fact that we can search, all of our SharePoint content, part of our SharePoint content. We can be contextually kind of searching, right? We've always had that experience. But as they continue to expand, they said, all right, well, that's pretty cool. Now let's make it so that all of Office 365 has a search, right? That's kind of like the delve pieces and all that. But now you can contextually search anywhere in Office 365. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so then now they said, well, you know what people would really like to see? All that contextual, awesome business search right there embedded in Bing. So that way when you're researching, reasons Todd sucks, I can get content off the internet.
0 hits, by the way.
Yeah. And I can get hits out of my own corporate environment, all right there in the Bing interface. And this to me, I've seen versions of this and stuff before, but the fact that they're finally willing to go live.
Yeah.
I literally just went out there. I logged into the URLs in the show notes, but I hit the URL. I said, I'm the admin for our tenant. Expose our stuff to Bing, or not to Bing, but in the Bing interface. I went to Bing. I signed in with my Office 365 username and password, and then I just did a search for Todd Sucks, and there it was. There was all of the internet hits, there was all the funny memes, and then there was my business results right at the top of the page as well. This is so cool to me. I couldn't believe how awesome this was.
Yeah, so we wired that up in Simpraxis, and I haven't used it much, mostly because I don't log into Bing with that account, but I probably should. But yeah, I think that's just one more step into the cloud, and it kind of plays on those videos that Microsoft did a few months ago about Word 365 versus Word 2019, where one kid's researching a paper and Bing's built in and it can understand the context of the document. When he does a search, it's just, yeah, search is where it's at.
Yeah, it's spectacular and amazing. And honestly, if I was our dear friends at Google, I'd be a little freaked out right now, right? Because, for a long time, I think we've mostly agreed that Google search and Bing search, roughly equivalent, right? Google does some things better, Bing does some things better. Google's probably better overall. I'll admit that.
Yep.
But the parity was close enough that it was really just, if you were a creature of habit and you went to one or the other,
I honestly don't know where I go anymore. I couldn't tell you which one I hit.
Yeah. But now all of a sudden, right, if they can really get this context of business search, integrated with your Bing search, I mean, that's a reason to switch finally.
Yeah.
For people who actually go and take advantage of. So I was it was super easy for me to enable and turn on, and I searched for Chewy, and right there at the top there was Chewy's people record.
I was just going to mention that it does the people search built in. Yep.
Yeah, right. All the content, the documents, my SharePoint stuff, and then just the regular Chewy.com internet stuff because Chewy's a celebrity, and it was so simple just to do. And I'm like, this is a reason to move to Bing if you want to use search. So. Yep.
Definitely check that out. Yeah. It's very impressive, and it's they're marching forward and just adding new things I'd never thought of. I'm impressed.
And that's where they just keep winning, right? Is this idea of it's an integrated ecosystem, right? It's a whole story instead of a bunch of piecemeal, right? I mean, like if you look at Power BI, you can be like, oh, well, there's Tableau and there's blah, all these other all these other data analytics platforms. But none of the other ones say, oh, by the way, you can bolt in a Power App to integrate with your data natively, right? Or you can, I mean, that's where Microsoft just keeps kicking the you-know-what out of everyone is instead of being a one-trick pony, they're being a multi-trick pony, and the tricks are talking to each other, and pretty cool.
Yep. We're getting close to the end. I wanted to give a little bit of an update on our home networking.
Okay.
We've both done some updating to that. So I kind of wanted to catch up with you and the crowd on that. So many years ago, I bought into the Ubiquiti networking stuff, and I got Ubiquiti access points and a router that did multiple WAN connections and all that. And then a few months ago, you switched over to that.
Yep.
And got the next generation of the router and the next generation of the management software. And not to be outdone, then I switched to that a month or so ago. And I've been running that for a while. So before I tell my tales, how's it been treating you?
Good. I have, I got it in. I played with it a whole bunch in the beginning, and now it just works, and I completely ignore it, which is probably exactly what I wanted. So
yeah, it's pretty good. So I have had a little different experience, not terribly negative, but not as positive as I had hoped. So part of the process, so I've got 3 access points in my house. And before there was a management interface for them, but I never really went there because, again, I was at the stage where you were at that point. I just never looked at it.
Right.
And it was running fairly well. And then I got the new management software, which adds a whole lot of really great information and management, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. One of the things that it would do was automatically update the firmware on your access points. And turns out Ubiquiti, they update that fairly frequently, a month or two. It's, pretty good. And then I started experiencing problems where my network devices were falling off the network. And it was only ever wireless devices. Okay. So it was not wired. And the problem was they weren't falling off the network. They could connect to my Wi-Fi. They couldn't get DHCP addresses, which I know it's a fine line, but when you're troubleshooting, that distinction is incredibly important. So wired devices always worked. Wireless devices worked part of the time. I checked my DHCP server. My DHCP servers looked fine. They could see the devices that couldn't get addresses. I could see the request, all that. And turns out it was a problem with some of the firmware that I had on my access points, and it took me weeks to get that figured out. Because for me, like my phone was one of them that dropped off, and it would have this problem. It would connect to Wi-Fi, couldn't get an address. I'm like, to hell with that. I just put in a static address and moved out. And then my laptop started doing it. I'm like, this again, put in a static address and just moved on. But then my wife's phone got hit with it. I'm like, well, I can't ignore this. But got that all working. I think it's mostly stable now. I've played with a couple different firmwares, but I'm really loving the information on, which access point has the most clients, where things are connected, how many 5G clients I have versus 2.4, which ones are using all the data. The information has just been really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's that management, right? The Cloud Key software, which was big pain in my butt in the early portion, but the fact that you get all that analytics data, I really think I've enjoyed that. And I don't think you've done it yet, but right, I ended up with 2 networks, so I've got the Nicole and I's and the kids, right? So then that way I can kind of keep their stuff segregated off. Because one of the things, I continually worry about, is the devices that come in, right? The neighbors want to get on the Wi-Fi and things like that. And well, that's how bad things get passed around. So my hope is that by putting them all in that isolated guest network, that they'll just keep all the badness to themselves and, not cough all over the place. We'll see.
Yeah, and one of the things that I had problems with the last one was blocking devices was easy. Unblocking them was not easy.
Okay.
And one of my kids was not following the rules on devices, and that device got blocked. But it was easy to block, easy to unblock. I could do it with my phone because of the app. So I've had pretty good luck with it so far.
Yeah, and I still have visions of getting the Disney Circle or something like that integrated into our network. I don't know. The Circle, so the new one finally supports gigabit, which, seemed like a ridiculous thing to support to begin with. But then I got to figure out the whole, so like, do I have to VLAN out everything to be able to do it? But then because it does it based on ARP spoofing, I don't know. It's a lot of work, it seems like. So until Nicola really forces the issue, I'm not buying another Circle.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear how your multiple networks thing works out, because I've thought about playing with that also. Are you running a guest network or just two networks?
The kids is a guest network. So I didn't use we don't use the login page or anything. So one of the things that comes built into all this is you can, if you want to have it so, you give people like a username and password to get into your guest work, and so they hit a web page and you have to say, I agree to your terms of service and put in a username and password like you do at a hotel. They have that just all built in. I didn't do any of that. Yeah. I just went ahead and just, you just need the key to get on. But then the idea of when you do the guest network is then it isolates, they can't talk to each other. I believe is one of the big upsides of the guest network. So yeah,
it's a different IP address range, so they can't get to any of your internal.
Yes, but I just still am stuck on how will the Circle integrate into that without causing me issues otherwise. So.
Yeah. Good luck with that. I'm curious to hear about it. But yeah, so the stuff that we're using, if you go to ubnt.com, it's Ubiquity Networks. We're using the Unify hardware. Jeff Hicks in the chat room is talking about they have another line called Amplify that is similar but more of a consumer-based. The stuff that Shane and I have is not maybe commercial, more prosumer, I guess is the term they're using for it. But they have both lines.
Yeah, and looking through it, there's a lot of people that are using it for like legit commercial, deploying network infrastructure builders. So people who are building networks for the people who are using it.
I saw a Reddit post last night about somebody who's using it for like an RV park, using all the same hardware, and they were showing the map of where all the access points were, and there was dozens of access points, and so yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I would like to add another one out for the garage. Right, it gets a little bit of service, but I had
to put one out there so that my car and my camera and my all that stuff could get on reliably.
Did you run a wire or did you just do?
I didn't yet, though I need to. I'm using power over or Ethernet over power line.
Okay.
So it's slow, but it's fast enough for those things.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've tried to figure out is, I guess I just drill a hole over there. One of the big things for these access points, one of the reasons I went with these was the wired backhaul. Right, I didn't want to do the whole wireless backhaul stuff, and so. Yeah, thinking about putting one out there, I'm going to have to run a new wire to get it out there. So.
Yeah, and so in the chat room, Lori's like, yeah, if you guys have to keep adding access points, you guys clearly have huge houses. I don't know if it's so much that, but the 5 gigahertz bandwidth, while is much faster, gets stopped by walls a lot worse. So, our 2.4 gigahertz access point that worked fine in one house won't work with 5 gigahertz as well. So that's part of it also.
Yeah. Well, and also sometimes the device. So I have the Ring wireless doorbell chime. So, and so that chime, apparently it has like no antenna. I mean, it is 50 feet from the access point and it gets like 1 bar to half a bar. I'm like, how in the heck is this possible? And it's just a crappy device, right? They just didn't bother to put a decent antenna in that. And so overcoming that, and to your point, 5G barely flies anywhere because there's a wall between us. But I think it's on 2.4 and it's still having the issue.
It probably is, yeah. So, the small devices usually are. Takes less power.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've liked it. It's worked out well. I need to add some I need to add some wire for different things, but it's been good. So we talked about before. I kind of wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, no, and you just reminded me also what's the is it a Wemo? Is that the plug that I have?
Yeah.
So I still struggle when I switch networks. Yeah, that guy right there, he only works on 2.4.
Yes.
And so because my access point broadcasts 5 and 2.4, he has a really hard time. So to get him back on my network, I've got to shut down the 5 completely. And that to me is Wemo needs to, go to where over all that.
So I can yep, go ahead.
When I changed my wireless networks, I lost the Wemo, and I have just not been willing to spend the hour it's going to take me to get the Wemo back on the network, and I kind of miss it. So.
Yep. So I've got a bunch of these. They all have the same problem. I wonder if you could create another network that was only 2.4.
That might be the way to go.
Because I've been having problems with my Wemos, and it hadn't occurred to me that it's probably that they try to connect it. Because 2.4 and 5 broadcast the beacon on the same frequency, and then they switch over, and these don't switch well. But I might try that. I might try a 2.4 only and see if these things grab that better.
Yeah. Well, to that point, I wonder if I should just make the kids' network only 2.4. I mean, because and one of the things, like in the chat room, they're talking about extenders and things like that. One of the biggest problems with a lot of these solutions, so extenders and the not having the wired backhaul and that type of stuff, is its latency.
Yep.
And so if you're watching YouTube, you don't care. But trying to do a Skype call or FaceTime or broadcast a show like this, latency really, really matters. So it's one of the reasons I've always been a big proponent of wired everything, because I tried the whole repeater thing one time for the house, and I just hated everything about it. So I'm very anti-repeater at this point.
Yeah, me too. I'm the same way. So I might try that. I'll let you know if that helps my Wemos at all. We are running out of time. You got a customer meeting here in a few minutes. Got to pay the bills. For promotion, things have kind of calmed down for conferences. The last 2 months have been crazy town. But tell the folks where you're going to be here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so Atlanta, June 9th through the 11th, I will be doing the Business Application Summit. So I'm doing a full day pre-con with Brian Dang. It's a Power Apps app in a day. So if you're going to be there, come see me for that. Mm-hmm. And then I've got a proper breakout session. It's basically, I've built hundreds, if not thousands of apps at this point. And so it's just, here's the things I want you to know. Here are the little nooks and crannies. So it's not a deep dive on anything. It's more of a top 10 type of, I did this and this type of session. So there's that. And then I'm also doing a session about InfoPath. I need to write that one.
You should write that one.
So so a lot of different things coming out there, but should be a lot of fun. And if you're going to be there, make sure you stop by. As Todd said, we're friendly. We like hugs and stuff. So come see us.
Yeah, and the other thing you guys didn't catch before the show, because we weren't live, as Shane was talking about these sessions, he was talking about how he was having trouble writing them because I wasn't going to be presenting them with him, and I'm his muse, and he was having trouble writing them without his muse. So
it's really weird, right? Because when Todd and I do sessions, I don't have time for this, but we're going to do it anyway. When Todd and I do a session together, right? Todd's like the super, we got to have lots of slides, we got to be structured, we got to
I freak out, yep.
Yeah, right. Todd's really worried. I'm like, we'll be fine. We'll get up there and do our thing. And so that work is a great dynamic, right? We meet in the middle somewhere, the sessions turn out well, everything's good. But so this one, I'm writing a new session that I've never done, and I'm presenting it by myself. So I have to be both sides of this coin right now, and yeah, it's I don't like it. So
there are no checks and balances. Yeah.
Yeah. Lori says she might be there. Lori, you might get drug up on stage just to stand there and me to throw shoes at you.
On Power Apps, Lori, just throwing that out there.
Because I just need someone. I just need a thing. So what I've done honestly is been doing photo shoots with Chewy. And so Chewy's going to be in like half the slides in the context of whatever it is so that I have a muse.
Yep. I get it. Well, we'll let you go. Thanks, everybody. I'll stay in the chat room for a bit and chat with those folks. Shane's got to go off and be productive. I think we'll be around next week. I'll have to check my schedule. But as always, you can go to toddclinton.com/podcast433, get all the notes and the links and all that. And we'll see you next week.
Toodaloo.